Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Comics Lair for our discussion of Hawkeye as a friend, mentor, and family man. I'm your host, Nancy Northcott. The Comics Lair is sponsored by Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. We'll start with the panelists introducing themselves and telling us a little bit about how they got interested in Hawkeye. Mike, will you start?
Yeah, I'm Mike Davenport, the creative director of the Marvel Universe Online project, and I got into Hawkeye probably back in the early '90s as when he first joined. I think it was when he first joined the West Coast Avengers is when I really started paying attention to Hawkeye as he became the leader of his own team. Then he became interesting because of the fact that he was kind of at the time he was kind of an anti version of Captain America. He was a hard-headed, stubborn character who just, got tired of playing by the rules, and his whole team reflected that at the time. So that's why I love the character,
Okay.
and the fact that bow and arrows were cool.
Well, aren't they, though? I mean, who doesn't love Legolas or Robin Hood?
Exactly.
Wayland, what about you?
I've been reading comics a very, very long time. I think the first time I remember running across Hawkeye was during the 80s Avengers run, where he would sort of join the team for a while and then leave. And then he got his own 4-issue solo series, which was really well done, or at least I thought it was. And then after that, spun off into eventually West Coast Avengers, as Michael was just talking about.
Okay. Bobby?
Yeah, I'm right there with Wayland. I think it was the 80s when I really became aware of Hawkeye. And yeah, probably it was in the Avengers book because I remember there was a bit where he gets replaced by the Falcon at one point, and
Oh, yeah.
he is not happy.
Yep.
And but I also agree. I think where Hawkeye really solidified himself as a wonderful character for me was in that 4-issue miniseries, which is just fantastic. Where he kind of, it's the first time he's not, he was, it took him from sidekick to star.
Yeah.
So from there I became a even bigger fan. And then I followed him to West Coast Avengers and just a big fan.
Well, if I say to you Hawkeye as mentor, who does that bring to mind, or what relationship does that bring to mind? Wayland?
He doesn't do a ton of mentoring in the comics. I think in the comics it's pretty much only been Kate, unless I'm badly misremembering. In the movies, he's done it with both Wanda and then later Kate in the series on Disney Plus. I think he certainly could be a really good mentor for people, and a lot of the time I think he's just not that interested.
Okay. Bobby?
Well, I mean, Kate's probably the biggie. I do remember there was a period where he kind of helped they were a very loose team, but he helped the Great Lakes Avengers
Yeah.
Oh,
in the early days.
and the
Yes.
Thunderbolts.
And the Thunderbolts. He kind of helped the Thunderbolts. Because the Thunderbolts, for those that don't know, the Thunderbolts are villains pretending to be heroes, who then most of them actually become heroes because of the act of pretending to be heroes. And after Baron Zemo is out of the picture, Hawkeye steps in and becomes their leader. And that was a really good. I thought that was a really good mix up of those characters together.
Mike?
Yeah. Like everyone said, the Great Lakes Avengers was a great example of him. Again, Hawkeye's always in a position where he wants to prove himself a leader of sorts. So I think that his motivations for the Great Lakes Avengers was basically to say, I can form my own. He's still on the I can form my own great team trip.
Mm-hmm.
And he believing that he could do it with anybody, he could do it with them, and they were a mess. But
and even
Go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna say, and even the West Coast Avengers was exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. It was him out there trying to prove a point, but it always comes with Hawkeye. I mean, even though it seems like he's being brash about it, it always comes from a honorable place for him. He does believe he wants to do the right thing. He wants to do good things. He wants to do it, but he wants to do it his way. It's always been with him. He's been counter authority, in the way he does things with his teams. And but it's always come from a place of good intentions. You know, even though it's always they're always rocky, rocky starts, rocky ends, rocky in the middle pieces with his teams. But yeah, I think as a mentor, it's something that he doesn't. He will openly admit. He'll openly say that he never intends to be a mentor. But in a lot of ways, I think deep down he kind of is. By example, in a lot of ways. He never really wants to take someone under his wing. And that limited series that he had with Kate, I mean, kind of solidified that he's all along the way. He didn't want to be a mentor, but he found himself becoming one eventually, and being very good at it, along the way.
And I think too, there are a lot of writers who have written him in a way where he really wants to, not only to prove that he can do it, but he wants to show Captain America that he can do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's very important
Very
to
important.
Clint that
Yeah.
Steve approves of him.
Yes. It's deep down, he really craves Captain America's approval.
Yeah.
There
Well,
was a
because
line,
Cap 2 was kind of the pivot point that turned Hawkeye from a villain to a hero.
Yeah.
That way back in the 60s in
Yeah.
the Avengers. So yeah, it seems like he's been chasing that approval
ever since.
Yeah.
Ever since.
there was
So
a
what
line
did
in one of the Avengers books, I think it might have been in the early 90s or late 80s, where one of the Quinjets gets shot down, and the little caption box thing is going on about how a lot of the Avengers get famous because they do something really well. Hawkeye does many things really well, and he pulls off this amazing piloting stunt to land the ship and not kill everybody in it.
So what do you all think of Clint's relationship with Kate as depicted in the comics and in the Hawkeye miniseries? Bobby?
I love their relationship. In the comics it's fun too because there gets to be a point in the comics where Clint almost becomes her sidekick at some points because he kind of goes through this thing where he's just like whatever. But I love the relationship, and I thought it translated well into the show, the TV series on Disney Plus. I love the relationship between them, and that for all that he is doing the mentorship for her, he doesn't. It's subtle. He's not do this, do that, do this. It's he's kind of working with her to make that happen.
Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's a great relationship because both of their lives are kind of a mess. And I think they find they find focus in each other. I mean, the difference between him in the comic and him in the movie is that in the comic he's a cold pizza and coffee person, single person. In the comics, who's messy apartment, life's a mess. He doesn't know what's happening from one day to the next, but he's an Avenger, and she falls in with him at that point in his life where everything is upside down. And in the comic, I mean, in the TV show, he's got his life, he's getting his life together. He's got a family, and then she's coming into that part of him where he's moving away from the Avengers, and she's kind of, her appearance kind of brings him back into that life that he's trying to get away from. But, both of them, the comics and the show, both of those characters realize her potential and the importance of bringing her into this world that she's going to go into either way. But like I was saying earlier, he finds himself a mentor. He finds himself being a mentor, against his own, against his own wishes at the time. But he knows he eventually steps up to the challenge, and that's what I love that's what I love about their relationship, because they're both, in both versions, they're both kind of leaning on each other to put their lives together again.
Wayland?
I'd go with most of that. I think if I'm remembering correctly, on the series on Disney Plus, the first time they actually meet, he's just about to punch her lights out until he gets the masks off and realizes who she is.
Yeah.
This is a kid. What's going on here?
Yeah, exactly.
And then I think my favorite moment between the two in the series was when his hearing aid was shot and she was helping him on the phone with his son. I thought that was really, really well done. In the comics, I think there was a short-lived, like I think third version of the West Coast Avengers that Clint and Kate were both members of, and there were some really good little moments in that.
Am I correctly remembering the miniseries, because I haven't watched it since it was new, as having a lot of him saying to her, "You stay here. I don't need you following me around. You stay here." Or am I mixing that up with something?
No, he very much tries to dissuade her.
Oh yeah, at every
Yeah.
turn, at every
It's kind of the sidekick trope, though. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
true. You stay
Yeah.
here, and it's never going to happen.
never going. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think once he realized that she was never going to listen to him, that's when he kind of like goes, okay, fine.
There was a Jackie Chan cartoon in the 90s, and there was a very young female character who was always getting into trouble. And at one point, he tells her to stay somewhere, and someone looks at him and goes, "You know she's not going to listen." He goes, "I know, but I just feel like I should say it." And that's
Exactly.
a lot of the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what's covering your butt, you know?
Well, in his long ago origin, he had a younger brother, and they ran away and joined the circus.
Yeah.
And without having read the books, which I have not, I don't know whether there was any kind of a mentor relationship there, older brother, younger brother, mixed. No, everybody's going no. So people who are looking for mentor stories would not look there. Is that
Well, I mean that they fell under the mentorship of the
Swordsman. Yeah,
who was not really a good guy, but
No.
yeah, that's where they learned their skills.
And then they retconned that a little with what was his name? Trick Shot.
Mm-hmm.
okay? Well, we're kind of touching on Hawkeye as a family man already. So I think what I'd like to do, if it works for y'all, is we'll talk about Clint as a family man and then maybe discuss the series in more detail, because it kind of blends the TV series, the mentor, and the family man aspects. And then we'll move on to friend and comrade in arms. Does that? Okay. So family man, Mockingbird. It does not look like the course of true love ever ran smoothly for them. So, Mike, how would you depict that relationship?
a train wreck.
For those who don't know, will you amplify that a little bit?
Mockingbird for a long time was almost like the female version of Hawkeye. They had the same motivations. They had this same history. You know, basically they were going around the same path. You know, and that's probably how their relationship built. They built their relationship, and they're both adventure. You know, when they were younger, they were both adventure junkies. You know, that's what got them into the superhero game. They were adventure junkies, and they fed off. Again, they fed off of each other's personalities, and it was destined. It was destined to fail. You know, and it began the trope of Hawkeye dating around in the comics. It began the trope of Hawkeye dating around the Avengers superhero community. So he's dated a few different Avengers like Tigra, and I forget who else he was dating along the way. But yeah, it was
Black Widow.
Spider-Woman.
Yeah. Spider-Woman.
First Spider-Woman.
Yeah.
He gets around.
He got around, yeah.
But that's not new either. I mean, in his earliest appearances, he was with the Black Widow.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
It was a passionate relationship that was never going to last.
Wayland, how would you describe their relationship?
Actually, I think their breakup really speaks to core values, especially for Hawkeye, because unless I'm horribly misremembering, what happened was Mockingbird had been attacked by this character called the Phantom Rider, who was a lot of different people in a lot of different ways over the course of time, and there was time travel involved. And eventually she just decided she couldn't deal with this dude being around anymore, and she killed him. And Hawkeye just could not forgive that. That's what led to their breakup, which for all of his brashness and anti-authoritarianism, I think that speaks to a lot of the core of who he is. He'll do a lot of stuff and he'll say a lot of stuff, but you flat out killed this guy when you didn't have to, and I can't live with that.
Yeah.
And then later when she betrays the team and like Vision is taken and dismantled, and that was he did not handle that well with her either.
No.
Yeah, he's very much you need to be loyal.
Yeah.
Because I think Wayland's right, because for all of his brashness, Hawkeye is probably one of the more loyal characters in the Avengers.
True.
Yeah.
Well, given that you all feel that way about Mockingbird, how did you feel when he turned out to be married to her in the Avengers movies? I mean, I was not aware initially that she was Mockingbird until we
Right.
got to the miniseries, but maybe y'all were.
I
Well,
I figured it might be, but at that point too, when she was first introduced, we already had a Mockingbird.
Yes.
Mockingbird was already on Agents of
Agent
Shield.
Shield, yeah.
and that was a phenomenal version of her.
It
Yes,
was. It was.
Yes. So when we find out that the woman he's married to is, I mean, also they never really, I mean, they tease a lot. I think they do call her Bobby there when they,
Yeah.
with the Agent 13, whatever it is. But one of the things that I appreciated about that is we've all grown up seeing Clint as the bachelor, the unlucky in love kind of guy. Seeing him happily married, it seems, with 3 children that he gets along with and he's there for. To me, that elevated the character a little bit. We got to see him, what he was like when he grows up. And I don't think we'll ever get that in the comics. So I appreciated it in the movies, and I thought the relationship between them was really well. I think that the actors play well off each other. One of the best things I thought about the Disney Plus series was him in New York with the kids, and then when he has to send the kids home, it's all about, I've got to get home so I don't disappoint the kids.
Yeah.
That is his, and like what you said earlier with her, Kate helping him with the phone call.
Yeah.
That's those kind of character moments that we will probably never get in the comic with Hawkeye.
I thought another brilliant sort of family thing that happened on the series a few times was when he's on the phone with his wife, and by trope there'd be all this guilt trip and what are you doing, why aren't you coming home, and she's just sort of like listening and giving advice, and they're
go take care of
on
business.
the same team, which is beautiful to see.
Yeah, I remember there's one point where he says, I should just come home, and she's like, no, take care of this.
Yeah.
And so I love that. I love that partnership between them. Yeah.
She understands the game.
Yes.
Yeah, because she was a Shield agent. And even in the movie TV version, they've said she's a retired Shield agent.
Shield agent,
Anybody
And
have
that's where she
anything?
started in the comics.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because before she was
named Huntress, I think originally.
Yeah, because I think before what she's given the code name Mockingbird. I think she's Agent 19 or something like that. Yeah.
Anybody have anything else to add about Clint and Bobby?
I still want to see them get back together. They were a great couple, and I'd really like to see it happen. I don't think it's going to.
Is she still around in the comics? I know at one point she died, then she came back. We found out she was a Skrull.
Comics, nobody dies forever.
Well, yeah, because she came back. We found out.
She's back. She's got a really cool costume. The last time I saw her, where she's got these sort of hard light versions of things that look like Falcon's wings.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, the wings. Yeah, that was a great costume. Yeah.
Yeah, because the last thing I read with her in it was she had that series for a while, the Mockingbird comic, and I remember enjoying those.
Yeah, those were well done.
Yeah, I mean, I think Clint shows up in them from time to time, but it was pretty much a solo series. But those were good. I think that's the last thing I've seen her in.
Well, she's in the Black Widow Hawkeye miniseries, which I think has 1 or 2 more issues to run, but I'm behind on it.
Yeah, I haven't read any of that yet.
She's the one who comes to get Natasha to get Clint's bacon out of the fire. And Natasha says something about, how are things with you two? And it's clear that they're not together from the way Bobby answers that. But that's the only time I've seen her in the series, and she was in plain clothes. So
well, I think too that the as a result of the movies, I'm assuming, I also love the relationship between Clint and Natasha. It's not the, because in the early days it was a romantic relationship, but I loved, because even when Black Widow had her own series and Clint's in it, it's more like it is in the movies. It's more this brother sister,
best
friend type of thing.
Yeah, but we're going to talk about Friends in a minute. So let's stay with the miniseries for right now. The miniseries and the movies and Clint's dynamic with his kids. You all have already kind of touched on that. Wayland, how would you describe that, and were there any moments you particularly liked?
In the miniseries?
In the miniseries or in the movies?
I think the ones I've touched on pretty much, the him and Kate on the phone call thing, him talking to his wife and her actually giving really good advice on the phone instead of trying to do a guilt trip thing. Although I think one of the most powerful moments might have been the very start of Endgame, where he's out on the farm with them and then they
they disappear.
He's looking around like, what the hell happened?
Yeah. Bobby?
Yeah, that's a heartbreaking scene, especially the way they shoot it. It's like they're there, they're gone. It's yeah. I love the dynamic. I love seeing him in that kind of thing. So that when we see him, like before we know he has the family, we see him with the Avengers acting one way, and we realize part of that is an act. Part of it is part of his costume, I guess.
Yeah.
And then
Mike?
once the Avengers find out he has a family, he can kind of turn that off around him, and he stops being, because Hawkeye has predominantly been portrayed as a jerk through most of comics.
Yeah.
And some of the early bits, he's a bit, he can come off as that. But yeah, I think those relationships really work. And I also think they cast it well. I think Linda Cardellini is fantastic
Yes.
as his wife. I mean, it's just good casting.
Yep. Mike, did you want to add anything?
I think it's his relationship to his family and his kids. I think it solidifies his character in the TV show and the movie as the anchor for the audience in that world. I think his character has always been our perspective of that world of superheroes through him. And I think, like you said, the beginning of Endgame was just devastating, and everyone in the audience felt it, because we see the world of the Avengers through him being the only one that doesn't really have a superpower per se and has an ordinary life outside of that world. I think it really adds to that he, everyone has the realization that he's actually a family man. It works very well all around.
One of my favorite moments in the movie, in Endgame, was when Clint goes back to test the Pym particles, and he picks up his son's ball glove.
Oh,
yeah.
And then he hears his family in the house, and even though he's not supposed to, he goes running into the house, and just about then his time is up, and he gets yanked back. And touching on the mentor thing for a minute, in Age of Ultron, when he's takes Wanda to shelters, as somebody mentioned earlier. And he basically says, look, I'm going out there to fight superpowered robots, and I have a bow and arrow, but I'm going out there because that's my job. Now you can stay here and I'll send your brother to get you and you'll be fine. But if you go out those doors, you are an Avenger. And then he has a wonderful exit where he kicks the door open and draws the bow and goes out. And it's hard not to like a character like that, I think. Because he clearly understands where she's coming from. And yet he's like, look, this is the way it is. Deal with it however you want, but this is the way it is. And I thought I meant to mention that earlier, and I forgot.
Yeah, because he's very much, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, yeah, he's just a normal guy out there fighting he's surrounded by people that can like topple buildings.
Yeah.
And he's out there with the most basic of weapons.
What was it? He said in the miniseries at one point, I fight bad guys with 2 sticks and a string. I don't know how much more simple you get.
Yeah.
But also they play up too. I mean, he's very much a tactician. I mean, sure. I mean, Cap gets most of the credit for that, but when he says we need somebody to spot and tell us what's going on, he sends Hawkeye to do it. Let us know, because Hawkeye is, it's not just because he's got the good aim, but he really does.
He sees the entire battlefield from a unique perspective.
And he's on Overwatch with Mjolnir when in the first Thor movie. It's up top.
And in the first Avengers movie, they mentioned too, like the Hawk is up in his perch. He's keeping an eye on the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, that
There's
is
a
not a
great moment
bad.
in the
What were
Battle
you
of
going
New
to
York
say it
when
again, Wayland? I'm sorry.
there's this great moment in the Battle of New York when he gets that one shot off and you see the arrow track through all of this chaos and Loki catches
Mhm.
it and smirks and then it blows up in his face. Which
Yeah.
and that was another great tactical moment because Hawkeye knew exactly who he was dealing with there with our ego on two legs.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, even though he was brainwashed, it was still Clint. You know, it was
Oh,
still
yeah.
Clint using it. He takes down Shield and the helicarrier and all of that, you know, almost single-handedly.
Yep.
So
Yep.
there's a lot of good information in Clint's head in the movies that really works.
Well, then let's move on to friend and comrade in arms, and let's start with Black Widow, because they knew each other before he really got involved with the Avengers, if you go back. And I'd like to know if there are moments that you felt really worked well between those two, either in the comics or in the adaptations, or moments that you felt really kind of struck a jarring note. Bobby, will you start?
I love them in the MCU. I love the banter between Jeremy Renner and Scarlett Johansson. They do that again, a chemistry. The two of them are really good together. You know, it's that back and forth of people that have been in this stuff together for a while, and I really appreciate that. And a lot of that has come to play in the comics, where they kind of have that same relationship in the comics now, a little more closely related to how they were in the movies. And I thought it was great. And I mean, you know, spoiler alert for anyone that's not seen it, but Natasha's death scene, you know, I mean, you know, they're willing to die for each other.
Yeah.
You know, and I think too, she would probably, you know, part of that, her making the sacrifice is because she knows he has a wife and kids to take care of. And so that kind of stuff, and her being, again, not playing, someone said earlier, not playing the trope. You know, there's no animosity between Black Widow and Clint's wife.
Yeah.
You know, it's like she's anti-Nat. There's none of this, oh, you work with that woman, you know.
Yeah.
There's none of that. And I love that. They can write that.
Yeah. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Clint has always been able to compartmentalize his relationships. And we see that the walls between those relationships, like when it comes to Black Widow, they were close friends, but it was always a professional relationship above all else. And you see that at the end, you know, the close friendship overrides their professional relationship to the point where, you know, this is like he can't let his sister sacrifice herself. You know, and you see a lot of that in his relationships where, you know, they become so close that he breaks down those walls that he puts up for himself to protect himself. These relationships, compartmentalizes these relationships. And we see him in those moments becoming even more human and more relatable.
Okay. Wayland?
When Natasha died in Endgame, it was Endgame, right?
Yeah.
You got to remember at that point, that was also not too long after he lost his family. So at that point, he had nothing left.
Yeah.
That was probably why they were literally fighting each other for the privilege of dying for each other.
Yeah.
And then as far as the banter goes, I don't think any line in the Avengers franchise necessarily was meant too much better than you and I remember Budapest very differently.
Yeah. And it was kind of the opposite too. I mean, because in that first Avengers movie, you know, she's on an assignment, and when Coulson calls, he says, "It's Barton," or, you know, "We lost Barton," and I'm on my way.
Yeah.
You know, she takes care of it. That works kind of both ways between both of them. That if one calls, the other's there.
Right there. Yeah.
Well, what was disappointing to me in Endgame, and I totally understand why we focused on Iron Man, because it was his sacrifice that saved the whole thing. But after that beautifully written scene on Vormir, is that the planet where they had after that beautifully written scene on Vormir, there was no sequel, really, where we got the characters' reactions to losing Natasha. There was a moment here and a moment there, but we really did not get a full-blown reaction scene to that until the miniseries.
Yeah.
And then, to me, when you add a scene like that, it adds depth to the relationship of the characters who are involved in it. And in this case, it was White Widow and Hawkeye, but it also showed the layers and texture of both of their relationships with Natasha. And do you all see anybody else as having a friendship like that with Hawkeye in the comics or on screen anywhere? Mike, will you start?
I would say he didn't really have a lot of close friends in comics per se. I, I guess he had some relationships during the West Coast Avenger run, but I wouldn't say he had a lot of close relationships other than like Bobby or not as close as Bobby and Natasha. I don't think he had a lot. And I think that was I don't think that was intentional. I think I think he never really wanted to get have too many friends in the superhero community per se. But no, I can't think of anyone else that he was really that close to, either inside in the superhero community or out of the superhero community.
Okay. Wayland?
I would agree. He was a loner a lot of the time. He didn't have a lot of close friends. There's one thing I just now remember that I sort of wish they'd followed up on. I think this was also in the mid-'80s Avengers run. They were sort of headed towards a Hawkeye-She-Hulk relationship. And then they just sort of backed off from it for, I never did find out for what reason. But the lead up to that was getting really interesting looking, and I was sort of hoping that was going to go somewhere.
The other character that gets around a lot in the Marvel.
The other character that gets around a lot. Yeah.
Well, there's more than one. I mean,
Yeah.
you want to take a look at Black Widow's dating history.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
That's true.
Well, what about Hawkeye as a team player and a comrade in arms? We've kind of already talked about that a little bit, but Wayland, give us an example of something that you liked or didn't like about Hawkeye in that role.
Back when they set up the West Coast Avengers, when they were going bi-coastal, I don't think there was ever any question, Hawkeye, you were going to be the leader. And then he did that again with the Thunderbolts. I'm not really counting the Great Lakes Avengers as much because if I'm remembering right at that point, he wasn't really so much trying to help them as he was trying to make himself look better.
Yeah.
Something had gone
He was trying to, it was an I'll show you.
Exactly. Yeah.
But with them and with the Thunderbolts, he was really trying hard to turn a team around and do good things with good people. And I thought he did a really good job in both instances. I think one of the things I would love to see in the MCU, if things ever get this far, is I would love to see him as like an advisor / mentor to this slowly forming Young Avengers.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Bobby?
Yeah, I thought because when Clint first moves up into a leadership role, it was during the time of the Secret Wars, the first one where everybody disappears.
Yeah.
And so he takes over. Well, the Vision is kind of in charge, but because the Vision was kind of like not in his own body at the time. It's really weird stuff. But Clint kind of steps up and becomes the leader of the Avengers while most of the Avengers are gone. And that's when and that's right at the time he married Bobby. I mean, all this stuff happens at one time, and then Cap and all of them come back, and suddenly Clint's like, "Well, I'm not in charge anymore." And then until the West Coast Avengers thing comes along, which is not far after that. I thought Clint was an interesting leader, especially in those early days when he didn't know how to do it. He hadn't quite learned. There is a fantastic one-shot issue where with everybody missing and all this stuff going on, he's trying to bolster the team's image and show the world that we're still here, we're still taking care of things, even though Cap, Thor, et cetera, are gone. And they go on the David Letterman show.
Oh, Assistant Editor's Month.
Yeah. Oh my God, it is an absolutely hilarious issue. But that shows that he's trying, but we see him stumble in learning how to run a team. But I think once we get to the West Coast Avengers, we find him start to really learn, how to do it. And we do see a lot of stuff too, where he is comparing himself to Cap. Yeah. Well, Cap, I'm not Cap. Cap does it this way. I don't do that.
Do it that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, anything to add?
And he becomes, as teams go, he becomes the fixer of broken toys. So if you look at all the teams he's ever had, you know, there are these broken characters like U.S. Agent and Tigra and Wanda on a team. I mean, there's no way that that team could possibly work. But you know, it's a testament to his personality that he's gonna do whatever he can to make this team work because he's got to show again. You got to show Cap. You know, I can take these messed up characters and I could make a functional team out of them. And he's always at first he didn't like the idea that you know I get you know the Avenger leftovers, but it became a part of his moniker that's how he operates. He can take a team of unlikely characters and form them into an well operating you know force for good. You know he's after a while he simply embraced it.
Well, you know, one of the things that I liked the most about the movies was, and it was, they didn't make a big deal out of it, but to me it was a big deal because Fury had helped him set up this farm with Bobby and the kids, and nobody knew about it. And yet their backs were to the wall, and he says, I know somewhere we can go. And that speaks to a lot of trust in his part toward them.
Yeah.
And even though they were all nicely, I thought, a little bit weirded out about how did this happen? Why didn't we know about this? They kind of took it in stride and did their best to interact well with the family. And I just think you don't do that unless there's a lot of trust going both ways.
And that's part of his compartmentalizing his life. You know, as a shield agent, you know, he trained himself to compartmentalize his life so that part of the keeping his information close to the vest was that not letting anyone know he has a family unless it was absolutely necessary. And I guess in that scene, he felt it was absolutely necessary because they had literally no place else to go.
It's also probably a good bit of keeping him sane too, because before the Avengers in the movies, Hawkeye he's black ops. He is not doing, he is doing rough stuff.
Yeah.
And this kind of keeps him sane and centered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you know, getting back to the teammate aspect and also the friendship, the scene after they break him free of the brainwashing between him and Natasha in his cabin.
Yeah.
When he is just wrecked over having had this done to him. And he says, do you know what it's like to have somebody pull you out and put somebody else in there? And she says, you know that I do. And so they're just talking about that back and forth. And then when they're getting ready to go, Cap comes in and says, can you fly a Quinjet? And she goes, no. And he says, I can. And Cap looks at Natasha, and when she nods, he's like, okay, we're in. And that's, to me, that's teamwork and cohesion. And so it didn't cost him his place that he had this lapse and this problem, because his teammates were willing to trust him if the one who knew him best was willing to trust him.
And there was another great callback to that whole mind control thing during Age of Ultron when Wanda is enslaving the whole team and Hawkeye's just like, nope, been there, not a fan.
So another thing that I really liked was in the miniseries, and it's just a little thing in the kitchen when he's replenishing his arrows, and they're all laid out on the counter. Do y'all remember that? And they're all labeled for what they're for. And I thought, you know, it's really impressive that he can reach down, feel the tip of that arrow, and know whether it's the one he wants. That's pretty cool.
Can I geek out for a minute?
Huh?
Can I geek out for a minute?
Sure.
Go for
In
it,
the comics, the way they explain that is the notch on each arrow is slightly different.
Yeah.
So he reaches back and he can feel it, and he can feel the difference in the arrows. I think that came up. I think that first came up in his limited series, and then they sort of reinforced it in that whole Handbook of the Marvel Universe thing.
Yep.
Yeah, well, you would need something to be sure that you shoot Loki with the one that's going to explode rather than the one that's just going to sit there in Loki's hand.
Which
and I'm glad they haven't shied away from trick arrows.
Yes.
You know, because that's just the coolest stuff in the comics. And and especially the miniseries plays it up a lot. But yeah.
Anybody have anything to add to that?
I love his costume was the best adaptation possible for his comic version. I say, you know, a lot, exactly. exactly. That costume would be a struggle, live action. I think they did a really good job of displaying, a good style as well as functionality. In the first movies, you see how the tips rotate around to select a particular type of arrowhead.
I loved
That
that scene, and then they never
that was
followed up on
awesome.
it, which was so disappointing.
Right, right. That was so awesome. Like you always wondered, how does he select? I mean, yeah, how he's picking back and he's picking the arrow, but how does he select an arrowhead for what needs to be done? A regular arrowhead or exploding arrowhead or trick arrowhead. And the only time you ever see that is when you see that rotating barrel that selects the right arrowhead. That
And
was
what?
excellently done.
Yeah, and I thought in the movies too, it's subtle, but it's like we'll see him in the background, like pulling arrows out of things because he's
Yes,
out.
yes, because he's out. Right.
Yep.
Because we've seen a lot of times when they do that, like if you ever watched Arrow, he
Mhm.
never runs out.
No.
It's like there's a great Saturday Night Live skit that Jeremy Renner was on Saturday Night
Yeah.
Live where they're doing an Avengers skit and he goes, "Well, I'm done." What do you mean you're done? 11 arrows, 11 kills, I'm out.
Out. Yeah.
And you have to wonder why, if you're an archer or someone who depends on marksmanship, you would wear a hood that blocks part of your field of vision.
Right.
But that would be
Right.
a whole panel on hero costumes. So at least Hawkeye does not do that.
Yeah.
He lets Arrow have that field all to his own self.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got some time left, and we've kind of touched on the topics that I had on the list. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about? Or do you want to talk about your favorite and least favorite Hawkeye stories?
I want to talk about Jeremy Renner for a minute, because putting the whole
Okay.
Hawkeye role to one side, his recovery after that horrific accident.
Just
If
amazing.
any of the Avengers are superheroes at this point in the real world,
Yeah.
he is.
Yeah.
Because coming back from that was just astounding.
And not only that, I mean, there was just a video a week or so ago where they were interviewing where we see him out running.
Yeah.
And it's like they thought he would never walk again, and here he is running. It's
Yeah.
just amazing. Yeah, very, very amazing story.
A little bit superhero-ish, actually.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And
I mean,
I love the fact too that it seems like because I know that in all the interviews after he was well and all he was talking about that, like even though that like all those Avengers actors still seem to kind of they're almost like an Avengers to they're all checking on him, they're all what do you need, that kind of stuff, what do you need, can I help? And I love the fact because we've seen so many franchises where the actors hate each other.
yeah.
It's wonderful to see this where they all actually, it seems like they all actually really do
Really,
enjoy one another's company.
They come together like a team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and Hawkeye's friendship with the Black Widow is rare in comics. You don't get a lot of male-female close friendships. Comrades in arms, yes. Trusted teammates, yes. Really close friends that you can tell anything to, not so much.
Much, no.
You've got Clint and Nat, and you had Dick Grayson and Donna Troy before she got shunted to the back. I don't know why she can't be friends with both Donna and Wally, but writers seem to have an issue with that. But anyway, that was a male-female, really close friendship. And I'm sitting here trying to think of others, and I'm kind of drawing a blank.
It's a good point.
It's a good point.
I'm totally blanking too, trying to think of it.
It is an avenue of comic writing that could be further explored.
Yeah.
Well,
it's also too like one of the things we rarely see happily married couples in comics.
Yeah.
Those are few and far between.
Those are few and far between.
Well, that was another one of the, and I'm going to harp on this every time it comes up, and I'm sorry, but that was another one of the major flaws in the DC New when they did that huge reboot, is every serious relationship they had, they got rid of. And so one of the things that came out of the editorial meetings later is supposedly one of the big guys in charge was like, oh, marriage is boring, so we don't want that. And I'm sitting there going, I would love to see you go home and say that in front of your wife.
Right.
Right. Because I remember I enjoyed seeing Mary Jane helping Spider-Man with things, she didn't need powers, but that was a sounding board. She helped him work out problems, or she ran interference. That was good. But we don't really do secret identities anymore either. So But yeah, so those kind of things are just, I don't know. I don't know if people think they're old fashioned.
That's Robert Downey's fault.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I think a lot of people, I'm kind of going out on a limb here because really, if you're a writer, you should be able to project yourself into a wide range of situations that you haven't personally lived. Happy to say I've never been in an exploding airplane, but I've projected my imagination into one. But I think a lot of writers who have never had close friendships, as opposed to dating relationships where you stayed friendly after, with someone of the opposite sex or the same sex, if that's who the character's romantically attracted to, don't really know how to do the friend thing. They don't seem to anyway.
Yeah, yes. Or they're trying to live vicariously through the character they're writing.
Yeah.
So this character sleeps around, but because that's what I'm living vicariously through you.
Yeah.
That happens. That happens too.
Yeah. And I think there's a feeling not only there, but on TV shows, because for a long time, Mulder and Scully had a great working relationship and friendship, and there were no romantic overtones to that in the early seasons of that show. And then it's like somebody somewhere decided, well, they can't spend all this time together without being attracted to each other. And so I sometimes wonder if that carries over to the comic books, and that's one reason we have so few relationships like that.
Well, and with the comics too, just from having gotten to know other comic writers over the years, and these characters have been around 50, 60 years in some cases now. A lot of times a new writer comes on and I'm going to write Hawkeye. Their first thought is, I'm going to write the Hawkeye I grew up enjoying. I don't care what's happened between now and then. We're going to find a way to get him back to that. And I think it's what happened with Spider-Man. It's like the new writers came on and were just like, man, it sucks. I can't write Spider-Man dating somebody.
Yeah.
So we'll do away with that kind of stuff. So I think that happens a lot. It's like, well, the Hawkeye was like this when I first encountered him. That's how I want to write him.
Yeah.
And I think that happens a lot as well.
Mike, do you have something to add?
Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and Dagger never had a romantic relationship through the entire run of their comic series. Cloak and Dagger have always they've always been friends since they both got their powers. And a lot of writers have come really close to writing them in a romantic relationship, but it never seemed to fit. Even the TV show, it always seemed they played that notion that they were really close friends, but it never really solidified into an actual relationship. I knew I had to think. I said there had to be one more at least somewhere. Cloak and Dagger.
I'll give you two more. I think on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. series, Coulson and May.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I had another one.
At least until near the end.
Well, but
yeah,
the many deaths of Coulson there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I had another one, and it's wandered away at the moment. I'm sure it'll come back later.
Well, there is another one, which is Imra Ardeen and Rock Krinn in Legion of Superheroes, because Imra and Garth are married, but Rock is really close friends with both of them. They're the Trinity of the 30th century, I think.
Yeah.
But there's just not a lot of it. And I sort of look at that sometimes, and I think it's kind of a wasted opportunity in the industry not to do more of that. And maybe it's partly secondary and tertiary characters don't get the development that the bigger characters do, and therefore there's not the page space to build those things in for them.
Well, sometimes it also comes too with general audiences. I'm being very general, not, audiences at large expect it almost.
Yeah.
When you watch a show, it's more prevalent in TV, I think, that. But if you see a show where there's a male and female lead, at some point it's coming. So we expect it. Because there's quite often I'm going like, oh, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. It's like I don't have to have every male and female character that work together in a show fall in love.
Warehouse 13 did a great job of that right up until the end.
Yeah.
Warehouse 13, did you say, Wayland?
Yeah. The two main characters, male and female lead of the series, They were very close friends, comrades in arms. There was never anything romantic until a lot of people were not really fond of the finale they did for the series, and that's when things shifted all of a sudden for no real reason.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, because either that, because it's gonna those type of storylines too. They fans want it, but then when you give it to them, they get
Yeah.
you have to drag it out that whole will they won't they or
It
it
sours
gets old.
the whole thing. Yeah, it
Yeah.
sours the whole thing for at the end. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it's kind
we've
of like, well, I
seen it.
wanted it, but I didn't want it like
Yeah.
that.
That,
But
yeah.
plus we've seen it. We know this story.
Yeah.
Surprise me,
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we've got about 10 minutes left, so let's geek out a little bit with favorite Hawkeye stories, or if there's a Hawkeye story that you go, please don't ever do that again, please feel free to mention that one too. And Mike, will you kick it off?
Oh, I love the miniseries. I think the miniseries with him and Kate, I think it was a long time coming. I think the miniseries could have happened maybe 10, even 15 years ago. I mean, the Hawkeye is a bit of a trope, as a character. The only one without powers trope. But I think there was always more to him that could have been explored, and it was. I'm glad it happened, but I always thought it could happen. It could have happened a lot sooner.
By the miniseries, do you mean the Disney Plus series?
Well, both. I mean, the in the comics, the miniseries with him and Kate that introduced Kate, that could have happened a long time ago. I mean, like I said, it was. I think he was enough of a well-known character that they could have written that miniseries for him a long time ago, and it would have sold. It would have been a really good run. Anytime prior to now would have been excellent. He was. I think he's as a character, he was always worth it.
Wayland?
Actually, I just remembered another person that he mentored in the comics, because it's a very different character in the comics to what you see on the TV series, early on in Echo's career.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Helping her get started as a hero.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a good story. His original limited series back in the comics, I thought was really fantastic. And I'll go further. I'll go two things that I'd love to see, one of which probably won't happen and one of which definitely won't happen, but I'd love to see both of them. For the MCU, I really want to see Hawkeye and Moon Knight together, because I think Hawkeye would just be utterly lost with what are you doing? What are you talking about? You're a god's avatar. What? And then another one that won't happen for so many reasons, but I think it would be fun to watch, would be Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye and Stephen Amell's Arrow together. I think would be great to see.
Yeah. Bobby, anything to add?
Yeah, the very first Hawkeye 4-issue miniseries is fantastic.
Yeah.
It was the first time Hawkeye had ever been treated as like the solo hero. To that point, he had always had partners. So having that was a really good one. I also thought it was really well written because it took him out of the Avengers and he was on his own. I thought that was fantastic. The David Letterman issue I mentioned is hilarious. I liked a lot of the West Coast Avengers. I really loved the part where John Byrne comes on and they bring in US Agent and he ends up kind of leaving the team. I'm kind of bummed that we never saw what he was going to do to get him back, because he leaves the creator leaves the book before he finished the story. But I enjoyed this. It was all set up at that point too. We never got the payoff. Because the new writer came in just said, "Oh, he's back."
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to think of the others. I thought when they did the Heroes Return with Kurt Busiek and George Perez, I thought those two wrote Hawkeye in the Avengers, and I think that's where the team up with the Thunderbolts started. He's really fantastic in that.
Anybody want to add anything?
There was one moment in the comic book limited series that really showed how determined he was to stand on his feet. When they're going somewhere to deal with something, they actually bump into Steve Rogers. And Steve says, like, "Hey, looks like something's going on. Do you need help?" And Clint's just sort of like, "You know what? No, we got it." And the fact that he turned down Captain America's help, I think was a great little moment in the series. And that he did, in fact, pull it off. I think that was really well done.
Oh, another one that just hit me. There's a great animated series called Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
Yes.
Yes.
They kept that series going. It was fantastic.
Yes. Hawkeye is very well portrayed in that. But so are all of them. It's a fantastic like a 4-season animated thing. It's incredible.
It was so much better than what they shifted it to with that Avengers Assembled thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like they dumped, there was a series of time where they dumbed down every cartoon they had going.
Yeah.
They downgraded the Avengers and they downgraded the Teen Titans, and just, it was, I don't know what they were doing.
Yeah, but Earth's Mightiest Heroes is a fantastic one, and yeah,
100%.
it's kind of like it very much in the vein of the Batman the Animated Series, almost in animation and type of stories they were telling.
Well, I also liked in the Black Widow, they seem to give her a book and it lasts about 8 to 12 issues and then it's gone. So one of the recent attempts at that, Natasha had been brainwashed into thinking she was married to this architect and they had a little kid. And it's Clint and Bucky who are looking for her, who are not a pair that I would ordinarily have put together. But I thought the way it was written, it worked really well. And their concern for Natasha was sympathetic and real, and it came across as believable. And Clint was especially concerned for her, but I think at one point she'd been involved with Bucky, and that was what led to the two working together on that.
It was like a flipped version of that League of Evil X's thing they did several years ago with Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah.
The X is doing good.
Yeah, yeah. There's a nice one when they brought Bucky back in Captain America. That's where they kind of reintroduced the two of them to each other, because apparently with the whole being frozen, they had met. And then when they killed off Captain America, Bucky becomes Cap for a while. Their relationship becomes very involved. Yeah.
Well, we got about 5 minutes left, so why don't you all tell the people where they can find information about you and about your work. If you have a new, recent, or upcoming release that you would like to mention, this would be the time to do that. Mike, how about you?
Well, I can be found at all the social media locations for the Marvel Universe Online project, or you can come visit our website at www.themarveluniverseonline.com. We are always supporting new artists, new writers, new graphic designers. So check us out. Like I said, we release across social media weekly, monthly. So enjoy the project.
Wayland?
I am some version of Wayland Smith on all of the various social media things. I speak at every convention that'll let me in, and I have a lot of fun doing panels on those. I do a lot of hero reviews on a site called comicbookclog.com, and I am fairly active on Goodreads. I'm one of the few writers that actually has a good experience on Goodreads. And I have relevant to this panel, I have a superhuman mercenary series called Wildside Inc.
Bobby?
BobbyNash.com is my website. I'm on all the social medias under some form of Bobby Nash. It's sadly, I couldn't be the same thing across all of them. I've tried. I like Bobby Nash Writes on Instagram, author Bobby Nash on Facebook, stuff like that. I'm not hard to find. Upcoming stuff. I just had a new book come out this past week as we record this. There is a new Zorro anthology called Zorro Swordplay and Romance that
I want to get in on those so badly.
Yes, remind me later. I'll make an introduction for you. I not only did I write a story for it, which is awesome because it's a great character, but they actually hired me to do a couple of illustrations for it, which I rarely get to do. So that was nice. That just came out last week as we record this. There's always stuff in the pipe. I do serialized stuff on Patreon. There's always new books coming. And I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsor, because I was at Heroes Con over the weekend, last weekend as we record this. Fantastic convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. If you haven't been and you're a comics fan, you need to be there. It's excellent.
Well, I'm sure everyone at Heroes will appreciate that.
Yes, I had a wonderful time. I was only there one day. We had a signing. I guess I could say that. I wrote the next issue of the Hawkeye New York series for Time Bound Entertainment, and we were supposed to have it out for this, but it's a little behind. So we did a signing, and they did a Nash can that they gave out, which oddly enough, I have right here. That's the cover. Nice. And so I wrote the issue. So we had a nice signing on Saturday, and it was just a fun day.
Okay. You can find me here on ConTinual. My website is nancynorthcott.com. I'm Nancy Northcott on X, that will always be Twitter in my brain. On Facebook, I have an author page, and for some reason that I cannot explain, I chose to be Nancy North on bluesky.com, and once you make that choice, you can't unchange it. So that's where I am. This fall, I will have out Traitor Mage's Fate, and that's Traitor, not someone who sells things. Traitor Mage's Fate, which is the next installment in my Light Mage Wars Paranormal Romances, and The Speaker for All, which is the first solo novel in the Outcast Station series that I co-write with Jeannie Adams. So thank you to everyone on the panel for participating in this discussion. Thank you to everyone who's watching, and thank you to our aforementioned sponsors, Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. For more information about them, visit heroesonline.com.